Hello, my name is Monica Brown and I teach 8th grade U.S. History and Social Studies at Key Middle School. Today we're going to examine the Constitutional Convention of 1787. We'll also look at the events that surrounded Shays' Rebellion. But for the most part, we're going to examine how this new form of government is going to change the course of a new country. But before we begin, there are a couple of things that you will need to have today. You're going to have a pen or pencil, and you will need to have paper. You definitely need to have paper or your journal that you would like to write in. You do have a couple of assignments that I'd like for you to complete today. So let's look at our learning targets and see what we're learning today. We're going to summarize the strengths and weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, and we will explain how the Northwest Ordinance established principles and procedures for orderly expansion of the United States. So let's look at calling the Constitutional Convention. Here's your guiding question today. Constitutions help governments establish order and plan for growth and change. How did the Articles of Confederation establish order and plan for the growth of the United States? Well, while we think about how to answer that question, let's make a real life connection. So here's a question for you to consider. Which is better, a strict teacher or a lenient teacher? I bet you're thinking about all of the teachers that you have, and you're probably already thinking about which ones are strict and which ones kind of let you get away with a couple of things. I bet if you ask my students at Key Middle School, they're probably going to say, I'm more on the strict side. But let's read a little bit more about why I'm asking you that question. There are both good and bad things about having a strict teacher versus a lenient teacher. For example, a strict teacher may not allow you to chew gum in class, but make sure that the classroom is safe and organized. While a lenient teacher, on the other hand, may allow you to eat food in class, and the room is so unorganized, you find it hard for you to listen to the teacher. This is the same way we can think about a country's government. Let's find out why. Well, what is the Articles of Confederation before we get too deep into it? Well, after the colonies declared independence from England, the Second Continental Congress, they set up a first plan of government called the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation, it was an agreement among the 13 original colonies of the United States of America that served as its first constitution. However, some Americans were really worried that a strong government would take away their rights. Others believed that a weak government would not be able to control the 13 states. So let's look at the strengths and weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. Because of the differing opinions of Americans, the Articles of Confederation, they had many strengths and weaknesses. Today we will be exploring these strengths and weaknesses and figuring out why the Articles of Confederation did not last as our national plan of government. Let's do an exercise to help you better understand the Articles of Confederation. So there are 5 strengths of the Articles of Confederation, and there are 5 weaknesses in the chart I'm going to show you. As you read through each, determine if the statement would strengthen the nation or further divide the nation. Let's look at one together, okay? Let's just look at one, and I've highlighted for you to see. This one says, could maintain armed forces. That would mean the Army and the Navy. This sounds like this would be a strength because it means the government could protect the states from possible enemies of the 13 states. That sounds like that's pretty important to me. So now I have here a chart that I want you to take a look at. Let's read through these together and let's see if you can think about what would be a strength and what would be a weakness as we read through each one. So first one up here at the top, we have established a system for settling the Northwest Territory. Over to the right, no chief executive or president. Set up government for the Northwest Territory, guaranteed basic rights to settlers and prohibited slavery. No national court judicial system. Could conduct foreign affairs, signed the Treaty of Paris in 1783. Congress could not collect taxes or control trade. Okay, here's one we already did. Could maintain armed forces, that would be the Army and Navy. 9 of the 13 states, more than a majority required to make most decisions. Could borrow and print money, and all 13 states required to amend the articles. So I want you to take a moment to go through each one of these, and I want you to decide whether or not one is a strength or is it a weakness. I'll give you some time to complete this assignment. Here is your first assignment that you're going to do in our lesson. You are going to draw a T-chart. So that's the first thing I want you to do. You should have paper or journal, and you should have either a pen or a pencil. So right now, what I would like for you to do is draw a T-chart, okay? On one side of your T-chart, I want you to label it strengths. On the other side of your T-chart, I want you to label it weaknesses. I'll give you about 1 minute to draw your T-chart. Okay, now let's take a look at the chart one more time, okay? Make some notes in your journal or on your paper so that you can fill in your T-chart. Remember, we are going to list the strengths and the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. So you should be able to write down every single one of these in one of those columns, okay? So if you think, for example, no chief executive or president, if you think that was a strength, then you would write it under the column for strengths. If you think it was a weakness, you would write that under the column for weaknesses. You have about 5 minutes to complete this assignment. So we know that the Articles of Confederation did not last as our plan of national government. But why? What was the most crucial weakness? And why would the Articles of Confederation have created a government without a president? You know, were they worried about what happened in England? Were they worried about what they went through in the 13 colonies? Afraid that anybody that they put in charge would take it to the next level, would become this crazy, tyrannical ruler? Well, perhaps. But overall, there's another question to consider. Do the weaknesses outweigh the strengths, or vice versa? Well, now that you have listed the strengths and weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation on your T-chart, let's take a closer look at one strength, the Northern Ordinance. So one of the most important strengths of the Articles of Confederation was the Northwest Ordinance. As a result of the Treaty of Paris, what territory or area did the U.S. acquire? I have drawn a really big arrow, just in case you didn't see that, and it is pointing right there, the land all the way to the Mississippi River. So I wanted to point out where the Mississippi River is, and the area that was acquired was land that was near the Mississippi River. When the Treaty of Paris was signed, the US gained a large portion of land that had not yet been settled, and this was called Northwest Territory, and this was near the Great Lakes. In order to settle this land in an organized manner, the Articles of Confederation created the Northwest Ordinance. So, based on the Northwest Ordinance, what was the US government concerned about? I think the biggest thing that they were concerned about was this growth and settlement of the US. All right, so now let's take a look at what happened with Shays' Rebellion. I want you to follow along as I read, and I want you to think about some things that really stick with you, things that might surprise you. You might want to make a few notes as we go along. January 1787, Daniel Shays and his men decided that they had no choice but to rebel. Shays' men attacked a Springfield building where the government stored guns. Wealthy merchants from as far away as Baltimore, Maryland paid to raise a militia, and the governor of Massachusetts sent the soldiers to fight the rebels. The soldiers shot and killed 4 men, and soon the rest of Shays' followers fled. Several rebel leaders were caught. The men were brought to trial, found guilty, and sentenced to death. Later, the court set them all free, including Shays. For many, the rebellion highlighted a fatal weakness of the national government under the Articles of Confederation. Because Congress had no power to raise money, it could not help the states pay off their war debts, which forced the states to tax their citizens heavily. Moreover, Congress could not raise a national army without consent of all the states, so it was unable to act in time to assist Massachusetts. The realization of this weakness helped spur the events of the summer of 1787, when the Constitutional Convention that met in Philadelphia wrote a constitution that defined a stronger and more capable federal government. So let's debrief real quick. What is the most important effect of Shays' Rebellion? How is this event going to change the history of the US forever? Well, the biggest thing is that it led to the Constitutional Convention and the creation of a new plan of government, which we still use today. So now you have an assignment that you're going to work on. You have an authentic writing assignment. And I think this is kind of fun, and I really think you're going to enjoy this. You are going to create a text message conversation. Have you ever heard something so exciting that you couldn't wait to tell your friends? If you needed to tell your friends something right now, how would you do it? Maybe you'd send a text message, right? It's January 1787, and you are a resident of Springfield, Massachusetts. You just heard about Shays' Rebellion, and you want to tell someone about it now. This rebellion will have a huge impact on the US, and you want to tell your friend. Complete a text message conversation about Shays' Rebellion. Summarize the causes of Shays' Rebellion. Briefly explain Shays' Rebellion. Tell me what happened. And then explain the impact of Shays' Rebellion on the US government. Tell me how it happened. What happened? I want to know everything. If I'm the friend that's receiving this text message, I'm pretty sure that I want to know everything you know. You have about 12 minutes to complete this assignment. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you walked away knowing a little bit more about the Articles of Confederation and learned quite a bit about Shays' Rebellion and the impact it had on this creation of a new government. I'm Monica Brown, and I teach 8th grade U.S. History and Social Studies at Key Middle School.